This episode is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. Do you ever think about switching insurance companies to see if you could save some cash? Progressive makes it easy to see if you could save when you bundle your home and auto policies. Try it at progressive.com. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Potential savings will vary. Not available in all states.
Welcome back, everybody, to the Dealmakers podcast, where we're going to sit down with some of the best in the business to break down deals, strategies, and career-defining moments. Today, we're diving into the mortgage game with someone who has mastered it at every level. We have Matt Nader, president of First Home Mortgage, in with us. Matt started his career in 2006, and in just over 5 years at First Home Mortgage, went from loan officer to president. So along the way, closed over $1.4 billion in loans. And I'm sure you probably have a higher figure than that in mind. But led a top producing branch and became a recognized leader in the mortgage world. Today, we're getting into his journey, the mortgage industry in 2025, and keys to getting the best financing in any market. So, Matt, welcome.
Thank you for having me, Shane.
Absolutely, man. Appreciate you spending some time out of your busy schedule with us today. So, Matt, you started in mortgage banking in 2006, right out of Johns Hopkins. What drew you into that industry?
To be honest, Shane, nothing drew me into the industry. I was cheating. I was hitting the cheat code, if you will. I was going into my senior year, and I played a sport in college, and it was the winter of '05. And to be honest, I wanted to take a quick internship and grab 3 credits to make my season easier. So this, again, winter of '05, my older brother was at JP Morgan Chase, Jason, who's now the branch manager in Annapolis, First Home. And I went in and I was there for, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, we'll call it. And I was interning. I was building up coffee. But at the time, 2005 was very much like a 2021, meaning there was so much business going on at the time. So what led me to the industry, honestly, was I was sitting in this office and I was looking around at who was in there, at the network they had, at their work ethic and their aptitude, et cetera, and said, maybe I should do this. This is about relationships and people and customer service. Like, this is my jam.
Yeah.
This is what I know well. And that's kind of how I got started after my, say, 2.5 weeks of this internship. I remember I walked into my mentor, his office, and I asked him, I really appreciate the opportunity for the internship. And I remember asking him, I think I would do really well at this. And I remember he looked at me and sat back and said, explain your why. And, I think I spoke for 3 or 4 or 5 minutes, and I guess he just realized I would skip nuts out of sell. Might as well give him a job. And that's really what led me into it. I had a couple offers I was going to work on Wall Street, which is what I wanted to do. And, I looked at, again, the industry in itself, and I said to myself, I truly believe I can outperform. And the network that I have and being local, playing a sport, and I feel like I can continue to grow a sphere of influence and an industry that's relationships and, again, customer service. 2 things I believe I can do pretty well at.
Yeah. Well, I will second that as somebody that has been side by side with you for a while. What was that first role? So you started at JP Morgan and then transitioned over to Bay Capital Mortgage at some point. What was it like working at a major bank and then kind of a regional lender? And how does that help shape your perspective?
Sure. So, going back to the time then, early 2000s, the majority of mortgages were written at a retail shop. It wasn't until about 2009-10, after the financial crisis of '08, that independent mortgage banks became more prevalent in the market. So my time at Chase was different. It was retail. It was, a lot of regulation, bank regulation, different practice. in my first year, I did pretty well. 2006, it was there I started August 31 of 2006. First 4 months, I was wet behind the ears, didn't know how to spell a mortgage. 2007, I remember I was there for 4 months, and I remember my boss at the time said, "All right, bud, now's your time." And I said, "What do you mean?" He goes, "Well, either you're this sink or you swim, and that's it. I've given you enough that you need. You don't have any more guaranteed pay." I remember I had a non-cumulative draw of $2,000 a month. I remember, meaning if I didn't make $2,000, then they'd pay me $2,000. If I made $3,000 in that month, I'd only get my $3,000 and not the extra two. That was it. And that was 4 months, and then it was, "This is how this industry works. You can eat what you kill. So good luck." And that was basically it.
Damn.
So fortunately now I have 5 children and an expensive wife and all the above. So fortunately at the time I didn't have many expenses, and it was so I just went after. I had a pretty good 2007 as a younger, kid in the industry.
Yeah.
And then 2008 happened. There was 9 mortgages, I think, written in the state of Maryland. I didn't want them, maybe at best. I had to borrow money from my dad. I thought about getting out of the industry. I remember I would wake up at 4 a.m. and I would go like work at a construction site until about 7:30 or 8 just to make a couple of bucks. And then I'd go hit my desk and make phone calls and do whatever I possibly could. And, the industry at the time was different than what we've seen in the last 2 years. It was more there was plenty of inventory out there.
Yeah.
Plenty of inventory out there. There was just no buyers that wanted to actually buy homes. And, as a young kid, for me, I just got to figure it out. And I just kept going and going and going, 14 relationships. And honestly, like, I had some pretty good origination years, and those all go back to 2008, 9, 10, 11, 12, like when I was building my business, when I was just working because I didn't know any other way. I left JP Morgan Chase in 2011, I believe. And that's really where, the industry changed post 2008 crisis. There was a lot of change going on. TRID was the big one. And honestly, I love that the government put in play. Really what it did was it leveled the playing field as to what the consumer could take in regards to a mortgage and how somebody would price it. So going back to the 2008 crisis, if you will, and prior to that mortgages being written, there was predatory lending out there. And it really evened the playing field with that. With that said, the retail side, a big bank, if you will, it became more challenging to originate at. Therefore, a lot of higher end or bigger originators were going to independent mortgage banks. And the guys that I worked with at Chase went into a company, Bay Capital, recapitalized it, and I was a loan officer there for another 6 or so years. And then in fall of 2017, Bay Capital was a good company. It was more about I wanted to grow. I knew that I had the ability to grow my business, and I needed more support. And at the time, they wanted to see the business before they wanted to get the support. And it's a huge reputation game, right? And if you really can't have any tarnishes on your reputation, that every deal has to be perfect, and that's the way you organically, properly grow your business. So for me, it was, all right, well, then I got to kind of, start peeking around, and I found First Home, and honestly, First Home has changed my career and the way that I operated daily, and clearly, what I'm doing today. So
yeah.
I had a fun career originating. I miss it. I miss talking to you often. I miss talking to the agents that I used to speak to. Now I miss some of those quick wins, if you will.
Sure.
This is what I'm doing now. It's much longer duration to get to the win, but the wins are much bigger as well.
Yeah. Yeah. I get that. So with you mentioned TRID for our audience that's not in this every day the way that you and I are. What is TRID?
So what TRID did was there was a handful of things that ended up changing. One of the biggest that changed, and what I was referring to was the way a loan officer could be compensated on a file.
Okay.
And what happened was some of the predatory lending came from higher compensation, or there was more margin in some of the riskier loans, if you will. And the government changed the ways that a loan officer or a lender has to disclose, and then really some of the recourse behind disclosing improperly. But the big one was the compensation piece. And again, I'm all for it. I think it was the right thing to do. Looking back in the early 2000s, I really didn't participate in much of the, the stating type of loans. I heard about them. They sounded pretty cool. So you don't have to do anything and they get a mortgage. Fantastic. But what it did again is it leveled the playing field not only for mortgage companies and how they had to operate, but most importantly, it protected the consumer. And there just wasn't protection of the consumer prior to. So good protection for the consumer that they can't be sold an unwavering loan and be hard to perform.
So we have something similar right now in many respects in the real estate space, at least from an agent standpoint. So they've put in place as of August of last year, August 2024, different requirements and different practices. So if you want to go and show a buyer a house, you now, a lot of it, let me back up here for a second for the audience. So every state has different regulations and different practices that they're allowed to do. What happened in August of 24 was they made a federal mandate saying that if a buyer wants to go and see a house, they have to have a representation agreement with a buyer agent prior to seeing that house if they want representation. And that agreement now has to spell out what that compensation is that agent is going to be receiving from any sale. And in most cases, the seller, for the longest time, was paying a not necessarily an industry standard, but there was an expectation that the seller was going to cover the buyer broker fee in order for that broker to bring them a ready, willing, and able buyer. In Maryland, there really wasn't much that changed with how we practice. I think a lot of agents ended up getting that buyer broker agreement signed sooner than they would have otherwise. But most of the time, what we're saying now is a little bit more confusion on our end because it's no longer allowed to be advertised in the MLS what that buyer agent compensation is. So now there's an extra step for a buyer agent to call the listing agent ahead of time and say, hey, I have a buyer. They want to see your house that you have listed at 123 Main Street. And, we can go and see it this day and time. What are you compensating on it? Where we never really had to ask that question before. It was all in the system. I think that they'll probably make some adjustments over time, but the general consensus is it's a good thing for the consumer to be able to understand, here's what the seller is paying. If there's a delta between what they're paying and what your agreement says, you're responsible for that delta as the buyer. I think there was a lot of confusion in different jurisdictions within Maryland because some people would get to the settlement table and they'd say, whoa, hang on now.
Not getting paid. This isn't right.
Exactly. There's an extra fee here that says I got to pay you, half a point for what? But isn't the seller paying for your fee?
Right.
And I think that was just poor communication. So this kind of forces buyer agents to have a lot more communication, which I'm sure is, ultimately it is a good thing. I think the way that we've gone about it's kind of, it has not been tactful. But ultimately I think they'll iron it out. But what your story kind of resonates with what we're dealing with right now. So I understand that.
So do you think the NAR changes, do you think that ultimately protects the consumer? In two parts, part of there is, do you think that the consumer, if they're looking at a home and they're looking for, let's say, a deal, if you will, if they choose to not have real representation, to try to negotiate those extra, 1 to 3% or whatever it may be, the outcome there, and I've seen it too many times, is I'm saying, quote unquote, saving money.
Correct.
But the outcome there, typically, a professional real estate agent ends up negotiating a better contract or negotiating through a home inspection, or probably see some things or flaws within the home that maybe a homeowner hasn't seen and the seller doesn't necessarily have to disclose. But without representation, how is this truly protecting the buyer?
Well, you bring up an interesting point because it is kind of Pandora's box. So you can look at it from that perspective and you can say, well, having a dedicated professional that has all they do all day is look at houses and have these transactional experiences that they can speak on, it gives you a tremendous benefit as a buyer to have that. But we are noticing a lot of people say, you know what? I just want the house. And so if to be more competitive, I think I'm going in to this without representation so that maybe I have a little bit more pull with the listing agent. You got to understand the listing agent's going to get paid what they're getting paid. They're not, and most brokers are going to say, if you're taking that listing at 4, 5, 6% total commission, most brokers are set if there is another side to this transaction, meaning if there is buyer representation, we're going to cooperate with that buyer and we're going to share a portion of our commission with that buyer agent. When there is no buyer agent, the listing agent's just making more money because most of these brokers are instructed by their leads, by whoever's running their company, be it the Coldwell Bankers, the Sotheby's, the Compasses. They're all saying, we're not expecting you to drop your fee just because somebody is not represented. That's a them problem, not a you problem.
Right.
So the buyers that think that they're saving money, they're actually not in most cases. Granted, on the flip side of the argument, you could say that, having bad representation is worse than having no representation. And so there has to be a better job on both sides of it, whether you're the consumer shopping for the right agent to make sure that your interests are represented ethically and financially and everything. They got to have a true understanding of what you're looking for. And then B, you have to be able to understand I might not win every single house unless I get creative with it, especially right now in a very short inventory market. Creativity might mean I'm going to have to compensate my buyer agent versus having a fee waived, because knowing, well, most buyers, I guess, don't know that listing agent's just going to collect the full fee.
Right.
But if I have representation, I at least have some kind of legal backing if shit hits the fan, which is going to happen, not every deal, but more often than not. Something is going to happen, something's going to pop up, and you need an expert to guide you. What we're seeing in a tight inventory market is people try to get creative, whether that means paying for all the transfer fees or compensating their agents in lieu of the seller having to compensate their agent. There's just a lot of different ways that you can go about still winning that property, and also having representation while doing it. I just don't think a lot of people are educated on what that is.
Yeah. So let me ask you this. Name of this podcast, Dealmakers, right?
Yeah.
Aren't we all deal makers
in some way?
And when did that shift? And I felt it, I'd say maybe during the COVID times, maybe we were just so busy, right? But like when did we stop becoming deal makers? And here's what I mean by that. Now that I'm out of sales, I'm still speaking to our loan officers, our sales all day long, right? I run calls and we have meetings, et cetera. So we're still talking best practices all day. And some of those, what we spoke about years ago was, hey, look, you're writing. So you call me, you're the agent. You say, hey, Matt, I've got Joe Smith's client who wants to buy 123 Main Street. I need a pre-approval letter, which means I've already worked with Joe. I've pulled his credit. I've got all his financials. I know that I can 100% get this loan to the finish line without a problem.
Yeah.
So then you call me and say, hey, I need a pre-approval letter, which is going to be inside of your offer. And it's letting the listing agent the seller via the listing agent know that someone has already reviewed their financials. They are qualified. They're ready to fly. We double down on that, and we have all of our loan officers reach out to the listing agent. We're pretty well known in the DMV. So, our reputation, our name carries pretty well. So a lot of times the listing agent knows the loan officer and or typically knows the company. So we always reach out and call. And a lot of times, it's funny, like when I was originating, the agent that I was working with representing the buyer, I'd ask them, what's the deal? How quickly does the seller need to move? How do we make this deal work? And for whatever reason, the agents wouldn't talk about it. But I would always call the agent and say, hey, it's Matt. Just to let you know, I've got Joe Smith all buttoned up. I've got, all the financials. I've got credit. We're ready to fly. Tell me when you want to close. What does your seller need? A lot of times the listing agent would tell me, well, why wouldn't they tell you? Yeah. Oh, my seller's building a house actually in They can't move in for 60 days. Got it. We write a 30-day contract and a free 30-day rent back. Let's get this deal done.
Exactly.
Well, when did that shift and why?
Well, it's funny you mentioned that. It had to have, I think it shifted a lot towards the middle of last year. And I think it was in preparation for these new guidelines that we had to operate under that would kind of force more communication. And there hasn't been as much communication with that. So some, depending on what side of the aisle you're on, you could say that, maybe some listing agents are being a little more cagey because they want to collect that full fee because now they got more buyers coming in unrepresented. And they're like, well, maybe I can make a little bit more money on this. And it might not be in the best interest of the buyers, but I don't represent the buyers. I represent sellers. And if I can net them more money and me, hell yeah. So I think that's part of it.
Okay.
And at the same time, I think a lot of agents don't want to have that conversation with, or I don't know that they're getting too busy or if they are unsure of how to have that conversation and how to broach that discussion with the listing agent because there is fear in the background. Like, gosh, if I give them all the information on my buyer, maybe they're going to shop my offer with the other people that are interested in this. And then they're just going to work with somebody that they're going to net more money on because this person's unrepresented and they don't have an interest in helping me get the deal done. They're just interested in helping themselves get the deal done or helping the sellers. That's probably a more pessimistic take on it than I think we'd like to admit, but I do think that that's probably more than likely what's happening more often than not.
Gotcha. Yeah. You remove yourself from that and take a step back. Like, is that what's best for the client, whether it be buyer or seller?
Sometimes it can be, other times no. And I think more often than not, it's probably a no. But what the new guidelines have done is kind of opened up a gateway for more, and this is a larger conversation, but I think it's opened up more of a lane for self-interest than for fiduciary responsibility. And I don't think that's the intent of the guidelines. I think the guidelines that were put in place were intended to help the consumer. It's just in practice, that's not everything that we're seeing all the time.
Right. Yeah. And, I think some of that gets lost, right? It's the fiduciary responsibility of an agent is to represent their client and to get their house sold at the highest and best return to their seller, right? And on the buyer side, it's to represent your buyer and ensure that they're procuring a contract that is at market. They are okay and comfortable with what the financing is going to look like or payments going to look like. I think that's something that's been lost in translation is, go back to the name of this podcast, is we are deal makers.
Yeah.
Right. And if we're representing the client and the client's best interest, I just think that like having better lines of open communication and trying to get the deals to work, it would be a better outcome than trying to I would say be greedy because that's the responsibility, right? You're supposed to maximize the return for your client. But I just think that like some of these changes could lead to the improper greed, if you will.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, the marketplace is the one that takes the ball.
Yeah. Oh, and I'll give you an example of a couple of things that we've seen. So we've seen some listings taken after the guidelines have been announced. And I won't use any names in the podcast, but we will have a leading team in the market, we'll say. And leading team will take that listing on knowing we're not going to offer what's commensurate. We're going to offer a very finite fee if a buyer comes to us. And that seller might be difficult. That seller is making things, has very short showing windows. They're not able to maximize what they have for whatever reason, but they're also not going to compensate people. And so with that particular listing, it's going to be impossible to show unless somebody contacts the listing agent directly and the listing agent is able to get them in. Well, listing agent is able to get them in because they've somehow worked their schedule perfectly and talked with the sellers, and they get that person in there, and that person is unrepresented. But you know what? I got a teammate that can represent you on this. And that teammate goes in. They're not making as much money, but they're still making something. And we've seen that, not a tremendous amount, but enough to be raising red flags. Like, all right, that's not really how this is supposed to work. If you're truly interested in maximizing what you have to communicate with the seller. This is what we need to do in order to get the best return for you. And if you're not willing to do that, then it tells me as a competitor, you're not interested in maximizing what's best for the seller. You're interested in maximizing what's best for you. And I think that's the wrong way to go about it. Now, it's a uncomfortable truth, but that is a reality that we're facing with some, not all, but some of the more popular teams or groups in the region that focus on listings almost exclusively. And I hope that it's not a trend that continues, but it wasn't a trend that we were seeing until these guidelines came out.
Sure. And I think some of this is a byproduct of the industry in itself and the market cap, right? And back to 2020 and 21, it was a $4 trillion market cap. And MBS's, mortgage-backed securities, meaning how much issuance of new loans were written. And that dropped to about 1.5 in 22. And, 1.6, 1.7, 1.8-ish, just below 2 last year. So, what I've continued to see is when you're used to making, as a real estate professional, when you're used to making more money, when you're used to seeing more transactions, right? When the market shrinks, and it doesn't matter how great of a marketer you are or who your sphere of influence is or what houses you've sold prior to, et cetera, it is simply that there was less opportunity because there's less conveyances. You see everyone doesn't stick to best practices at that point. And you see some things happening that aren't necessarily correct, or I see it in our side all the time. The law is how you interpret it and or how your legal team interprets it.
Correct.
The way we operate is we don't really want to play around the fringe at all. And some of what's happening in our space is we see some other companies that are, they're okay to kind of play around the fringe right now. And what's happening is it's affected our business. It's affected the mortgage industry in itself. So let's, I'd like to see how the next handful of months plays out.
Agreed.
Especially with what's going on in the federal government, with the federal government saying that they want to shut down the CFPB. What happens? What I see happening is I see state regulators kind of waking up a little bit. And quite frankly, I welcome it. I welcome it because getting back to an even playing field is what's right for the companies that are doing the right thing and are listening and abiding by the law and the way that the regulations were written. It's the right thing is everybody else kind of playing the same playing field. I'm a very, 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 very competitive man.
Yep.
If a company or organization creates a competitive advantage that's legal, you know what? God bless. And shame on me because I didn't find it.
Right.
When you're playing on the fringe a little bit, one, we're not going to play. Two, I guess it's a competitive advantage, although it's a huge risk, right? And it's a license, it's a company, it's a lot of employees. There's a lot to be thinking about, in that arena of, oh man, I used to make this, now I'm making that, or we used to do this much in volume and now we're doing this. And I don't want to say it's companies or individuals being desperate, but that's what I see things reverting to, and it's not what's best for the consumer.
No. Well, it's also like perception is reality. So if it looks like that's kind of a desperate play, chances are it probably is. And I don't want to stoop, not that I'm some high and mighty person. I don't want to, speak from a ivory tower. But at the same point, you have to do what's right and what's good for your moral compass and your company's, no pun intended. Yeah, how about that? Like that. You have to do what's right. And I think that a lot of what we've seen is, it opens up the door for people to behave on the fringes. And I don't like that. It doesn't sit well with me. I'm just, maybe not as competitive as you. Very few people are, but at the same point, I am very competitive and I'm willing to do what it takes to win a deal, as long as it's within the confines of what I'm comfortable with doing. And a lot of the stuff that we're seeing in the market doesn't feel like that all the time. And it could just be, it's hard to try and figure out, all right, is this just me being, jaded because it's something that I didn't get? Or is this the new normal and we have to operate in a certain way that's just not up to my, moral standards?
Right.
It's a hard thing sometimes for me to navigate.
Yeah. Well, we'll see how this plays out.
We will. So you had joined First Home in 2018. We talked about that. 6 years in, you became president. It's the key to that rise.
What's the key to that rise? It's simple. It's work ethic. There's nothing else. That's the easiest way for me to answer the question. What's the key to the rise?
Give me a typical Matt Nader morning.
A typical Matt Nader morning today, or when I was at Loan Ops.
Either one.
So I'm an early riser, wake up, get a workout in. I have 5 young kids. So the only time that I can get a sweat in, which for me, it's more of a mental thing, is early in the morning. So I'm up early, get a workout in. I'm home by 6:30ish, 6:45 after post-workout. I see the kids out to school and shower, and I'm like literally rushing to my desk as fast as I can. Like, I love to work. I love working. I love solving problems. I love helping people. I love this industry. And nowadays it's a lot different than what it was as I was originating. When I originated, honestly, I didn't carry a calendar. I remembered everything.
Yeah.
Because for me, it was, okay, I have to call so-and-so and so-and-so and so-and-so tomorrow. And that's my name and reputation. And it's my ability to feed my family. So I'm going to do it. Nowadays, it's very different. I've got a calendar. People build it for me. And I just wake up or I go to sleep the night before and I look at my calendar and say, oh, this is where I'm going. This is where I'm traveling to. I'm on a flight or a train or a plane or whatever, right? Like, so my days are way, way different now. But I would say they're a lot more structured now just because I'm on a lot of video calls, on a lot of Teams and Zoom calls.
Oh yeah.
Which I wasn't much back in the day, but nowadays it's, I had join leave all day long. What does the day look like? I mean, it can be anything and everything right now. It's, my days are they're kind of all over the place. I'm meeting with a lot of our managers and branch managers and our sales. So I travel a good amount up and down the East Coast. Right now, we've got 26 physical offices. So I'm in the office, the branches a good amount, just speaking to them. We actually had an all hands, call this morning. And really what it was my motto for 2025 for the company is better every day. And what I mean by that is I can't make this company better every day by myself. It's got to come from feedback, and it's got to come from the, boots on the ground, who's in our LOS, our origination system, who's moving the file from, point A to point Z. And we had another call today and just, be that squeaky wheel. I actually said to the company today, like, it might sound to you like you're bitching. I don't hear bitching. I hear opportunity to improve this company.
Yeah.
So, the mortgage space got turned upside down in 2022 through 2024. And really what it came down to a handful of different things. Going back to 2008 after post-financial crisis, the U.S. government bought the most mortgage-backed securities of any other entity out there, meaning the way that a mortgage trades and it works is you close on your home and then there's a mortgage-backed security that is sold to the secondary market. So prior to 2008, there was a lot of private takeouts or outside of Fannie and Freddie, GSEs buying these mortgage-backed securities, securitizing them and then re-securitizing them and then selling off into larger pools. And 2008 happened. Private outlets went out, gone, see it, won't touch a mortgage-backed security because they were terribly performing bonds going back to poorly written mortgages.
Yep.
Now, fast forward, from 2010 to 2022, fall of 22 is really when it started. Fall of 21 is really when it started. But what happened was the federal government would buy a mortgage-backed security, and you kind of know what they would buy it for. So there was a bit of a cheat code in the mortgage industry that all right, I know exactly what my revenue is going to be. I've got to just manage my expenses, and then I've got to grow my volume. And for 15, 16, 17 years, the mortgage industry was ran by one thing, and it was staring at top line revenue. And that's kind of all, that was the solution to everything.
Okay.
Now the market was also growing, right? From 2011 and 12 up through 22, there was more transactions year over year. There was some, there were some years that were a little bit flat. There were some down years, but on a bell curve, it just kind of went up, right? So then 2022, fall of 21, what ended up happening was rates started to come up just a touch. And then 22, we started to come up just a touch more. And what happened was the way a mortgage could be worth more money is on the secondary market is due to the fact that if you have a really low interest rate, the way that a mortgage-backed security gets traded at a higher value, the MSR, it's the servicing behind it. The longer that you can mark where you think that duration of servicing is going to be, the more that loan is going to be worth to sell.
Okay.
We have a 2.5% 30-year fixed rate mortgage. You're probably not going to pay that off. And if you do, it's because you hit the lottery. And if you do that, it's because you don't have a good financial advisor. Meaning, who's paying off a 2.5% note rate? You just let that hang for as long as you possibly can.
Yep.
So then as rates started to rise, as well as the federal government stopped buying mortgage-backed securities, a lot of things started to change, and these loans became worth less money. So it was like a double, triple, quadruple whammy in 2022, 23 on what happened to mortgage companies, because, the old solution that worked for 15 years, which was go grow your top line revenue. What did that look like? Go pick up a new builder, go recruit. That didn't change. That didn't change what the financials look like for the mortgage company. So there was a lot of expense management. We call our cost to produce. What does it cost us to produce a loan? And you go back to 2018, cost to produce a loan all in, including compensation, was $8,000 or $9,000. In 2023, it got up to $17,000 to produce one mortgage loan. So then you take margin compression, you take 50% of volume and transactions, and it all comes down, meaning margin compressions, these loans are worth less, half the volume, and the expenses skyrocket. Oh shit, I've never had to do this before. What do we got going on?
Yeah.
And there's been a lot of turmoil in our industry trying to figure out that, right? Remanage and reshape the mindset of how do you successfully run a mortgage company? And unfortunately, look, we had to go through a lot of expense management. We've been looking at anything and everything. This, to me, everything right now is about efficiencies on how you can make the loan from day one to settlement. How do we give the client a better experience? We give the client a better experience by efficiencies. And then what happens on our end of it is we have less touches on loans. We have more automation. We're finding these efficiencies, which then brings down our cost to produce. But in turn, it also gives a much better experience for the client. And the way that we operate, right, with our real estate agents that do referrals businesses, the better we can give a client, your client, right? That's how I look at it. The better we can give your client a home buying experience that they want to shout about. That their lender was fantastic. They answered their phone calls. They told them that I needed this, and then the loan would be done here, and then we delivered, blah, 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 blah. Look, the more inclined you are to get referrals.
Right.
And that's how the referral partnership works, is that I always looked at it as just that. If I can make you or the real estate agent look good, I'm more inclined to do more business just because we were partners in it. We did a great job. We serviced the client, and they walked away at that settlement table saying, thank you. This was awesome. I can't wait to go move into my house.
Well, it's a good way to put it, man. And that's the best way. That's the best way to do business, right? To do an awesome fucking job so that the only person that they think of when it is time to move or make that next move, or if they have friends and family looking to do something similar in the near future, is to shout your name. That's the best way to do it, man. So your days look very different now than they did couple of years ago.
My days look very.
Do you like that? And what I mean by that is, as a loan officer, let's take it back to sports. Loan officer, you're a player on the field, so you have a lot more control over what gets done. You might not have, you've got the game plan, you've got an idea of what you want to do, but you're in a lot more control. And when you move up the ladder into a vice president, now a president of the company, things change. You're no longer on the field producing. You're
in the press box.
Yeah. You're basically watching things from above and you don't have any control. Does that drive you nuts?
Does it drive me nuts? That doesn't drive me nuts. It's a job that I chose to take, right? Yeah, it is a big change because when it was me, when I was originating, I controlled how I operated on a daily basis. I can kind of a little bit, but I can't control how all the loan officers work on a daily basis type of thing. I can't control how they sell. I can't control, them digging deeper into the business, becoming best at their craft. But do I enjoy it? I do enjoy it. And this job that I've had this last 24 months has been the most challenging I've ever had anything in my professional career for sure. Even 2008. Those were hard years. But this has been the most challenging. And it's been the most challenging, honestly, because it's something that the industry hasn't seen in a very long time. Our organization, there has been a lot of change. And with that said, I think every organization has been a lot of change. But with that said, I had some tough sledding. There was a lot of tough conversations that I had to have with a lot of our sales guys or gals or our managers, right? And I went from high-fiving one of our top sales guys to running the company and then having to tell guys that I've got to take comp away, or we have to lay this person off, or we've got to close your office. Ultimately, what I had to do was I had to ensure that this company was able to forge forward and turn from where we worked making money, which no one was in 22 and 23, to getting this huge ship turned back around so that I knew that we had the ability as an organization to continue to forge forward. And I got a shut skull this morning, told everybody at the company how proud I am of everybody, because everyone kind of went hip to hip and said, all right, we do have to change. There isn't as many loans coming in the door right now, and they're worth less, and it costs more money to put a loan together. Let's figure it out. And, again, I'm proud of the organization as to where we are today with what we were able to do and change in the last 18 months, 24 months.
Interest rates have been a huge topic. How do you see those evolving in 25?
A call in the market is what you're asking.
Give me that crystal ball.
I would say this. Here's the first thing I'd say is anyone that tells a client of yours, anyone that sends out any type of social media content, any type of marketing and telling anybody where rates are going, I would say, it just doesn't make sense. Like, no one knows where rates are going, right? You go back to 22, as rates started to climb up, every economist was calling for lower rates in the fall. We rolled through 23. Every economist was calling for recessionary periods in the fall of 23. Recessionary times do get lower rates. But where are rates going? Here's how I'm managing our company. I think our rates stay exactly where they're at through the end of the year. I don't think we go, any lower than a 6 handle. I think we see some sprints here and there. But I don't think that we necessarily, go back to, I don't think we'll ever see sub 3% 30-year fixed ever again. I don't ever see that happen.
It'd be a stretch.
Yeah. What we see is what we get kind of thing. And here's one thing that I would say is, in speaking to our loan officers and having the conversations, with the loan officers, I'm not speaking to home buyers anymore. But I will say that it feels like the buyer has somewhat digested where the marketplace was. Meaning, when we first hit that 7 handle, I got calls from LOs all day saying, holy cow, I'm getting shot at the. But it seems like the consumer somewhat digested it. And honestly, like what I'm teaching and training on our end of things right now is someone that wants to buy a home right now, they have no negotiation except for with their mortgage lender. What I mean by that is a home price is more expensive, right? You can't touch that. You can't say, hey, I want to pay you less, because there's 16 other contracts behind it.
Right.
Taxes have gone up because home appreciation. Insurance is up 40% across the board. And, there's a natural disaster every week now. That's going to continue. We're going to see insurance continuing to rise, right? So the affordability side of purchasing a home has gotten that much more difficult. The only thing that a buyer can look at is that interest rate. And with higher rates, it becomes more challenging, right? The affordability side becomes more challenging. So, look, the interest rate isn't necessarily the driving factor about conveyances for home ownership, right? It's about where's the affordability ledger? What are you comfortable with as a homeowner? Is this the right choice for you to buy a home? And look, there are clients, they probably should buy houses, or they should wait for another 6 months or a year. There are also clients that have been renting for 3 or 4 or 5 years now. And you look at like where their personal net worth would be if they were to buy a house 5 years ago, bought a house 5 years ago compared to today. So like there's a lot of education that goes into this. And, you look back from 2008 and what happened during those times, the average age of a first-time buyer last year was 38 years old in 2020. 38 years old. It's the oldest it's ever been. Why is that? And if you look back and you look at 2008 and you look at all those kids that were in college and their college professors saying you don't want to own houses, you don't want to own real estate, look at what happened. Like there was a long pause of, what now is, let's say that 28 to about 40-year-old that didn't buy houses. And you look back and say, man, if we did a better job of educating on the why 2008 happened and how there were stop protections and how owning real estate clearly is a good investment. Would we be at a different point right now? Would our first time home buyer age not be 38? Would we be closer to like that 28? Like it's kind of has been all the time. Yeah. And would that be better? Would be even a healthier economy right now? When rates went to zero, would all of these investors been able to buy all this inventory up, which has now pushed that 35 to 38-year-old down the line yet again, doing their lease and then having to buy a more expensive home at a higher interest rate. So to answer your question, I'm trying to get around it. To answer your question, man, I'm not going to make a market call because no one knows. But if I had to make a guess here, I think that we stick around that 6.5% to 7% interest rate throughout most of the year. I think we're going to see some quick sprints here and there. Which if anyone's listening to this and you bought a house between 2023 and today, be ready, be prepared. Like we're going to see a couple sprints here and there. I do believe throughout the year, and there's going to be a refinancing opportunity for you. And then we had one sprint last year. And speaking to some of our lows, some of those clients said, nah, I'm going to wait for a little bit. I got you down to 5.99. They said, no, I want 5.5. And then that 5.99 popped back up to 6.5 and back up to 7. So, I do think we'll see a couple pops here and there. And that's where, you just got to be ready, prepared. And from our side of things, that's where we talk about a lot of, make sure you're talking to your clients, follow up with them, ask them how they're doing, ask them, where is it that you pull the trigger? How would this better your family's lifestyle? And if there's a way to better their lifestyle, then we should be selling and making sure that we're in front of them and advising and helping.
That is one thing that I've talked to our team about and something that I've taken from you. I look at you as a mentor for me in this industry. What you've done really, really well from the time that we've met and started working together has been constant follow-up and touching base, not to sell anybody anything, just check in with people and see how they're doing. It's something I do a terrible job at. And for any of my clients, I love you. I'm just kind of in my own world sometimes,
I get better.
Well, you're on to something here because it's a just at a human level, it's a nice thing to touch base with people so that when you do touch base with them, they don't feel like you always want something.
Yeah.
And you've always done an exceptional job with that. Just calling people just to say hello, just to check in. And it's not something that I'm good at, but it's something that I want to continue growing on. And I just love that it's something that our whole team, every agent should take that and run with it. We hear it all the time in trainings. I just don't think a lot of people put it in practice, and I'm guilty of that myself.
I mean, it's hard, dude. It's, I would say I used this line. It wasn't a line. I started saying it. And I actually had truly meant it. Like I wasn't a sales guy. I was a service guy.
Yeah.
But my salesmanship came from me investing into my craft, knowing my guidelines, knowing my programs, knowing how to qualify income, knowing that every single pre-approval letter that I wrote, I was representing you and your name and reputation. I was working with a listing agent, a seller, a buyer. There's an accountant in there. There's an attorney in there. You name it, right? Like, it's my reputation. So what I did was, again, I wasn't a salesman. I looked at how do I provide the best service. With that, how do I continue to make myself the best loan officer I could be? And it's by educating myself and reading and learning the industry. And that allowed me to talk to kind of anybody and everybody, a younger buyer, if you will, buying a $100,000 property or somebody buying an $8 million property. I had the ability to talk to them and understand how do I set the deal up that's going to be the best for them. Again, that's not me selling. That's my service.
Yeah.
And, I think that's a big reason why I was able to do, a decent amount of loans when I was selling.
Well, speaking of service, First Home is very well known for its level of service. And I think you're a big part of that. And so you guys are really at the top of your game when it comes to that stuff. How is First Home Mortgage innovating things to make the homeownership dream more accessible for people?
Sure. It started when the company was originated 35 years ago, and Dave Waters founded the company. Dave was an originator. Dave was a hell of an originator back in the day. And I say this all the time, that this is a company for the originator, built by an originator. And that's something that I think that, me taking this job it's unique in the marketplace because I've written loans. I've talked to homeowners. I've talked to real estate agents, right? So I understand, what that service level needs to look like in order to deliver that customer experience for all of us to continue to build and have new opportunity in the industry. So what are we doing? Like, there's a lot of technology and automation happening right now. We've moved over to full what's called RON, remote online notaries closings. We're one of the early pioneers with this. And what is that like? Where's the benefit there? The benefit there is there was a day that if I was buying a home and the seller could only close on this date, I had to be there. And then we had a power of attorney come into play. But typically the power of attorney was always a last minute thing and you had to get a notary. But this is hey, you can be wherever you want if you want to close your loan. And on a purchase transaction, some want it, but honestly on a refinance transaction, it's a really simple transaction. You're just refinancing your home loan, right? You're typically taking a lower interest rate, a higher interest rate down lower, or you're taking an equity position and you're extracting some of that equity out. You're not changing the house, right? You're changing the terms of the loan, but as long as you've done a good job as a loan officer up front and explaining the financing, do you really need to go to a title company? I don't think you do. We're working on a handful of different dashboards and apps, consumer-facing apps, realtor-facing apps. What's also happened in the last handful of years is there's a lot more product that's come out. Meaning everyone's trying to be unique and trying to find the next best product, a proprietary product. We built a lot of product in the last 24 months. Again, those product takeoffs are coming back, so we're building credit boxes and looking at new product all the time. So what are we doing? Again, we've built a tool internally that plug in an address and I can find all of the products that are available for this client, whether it be a grant program, a state grant program, a first home grant program. How can we maximize what we can give back to the consumer so that as hard as the affordability ledger is today, how can we offset some of that? So what we've done in the last, 24 months or so is looking at technology always, right? Technology is something that it's not going to go away, right? Internet didn't go away in the 90s. It's still here. I don't think technology is going to go away anytime soon.
No.
But ensuring and understanding what your tech stack looks like to make sure that your monies aren't being spent for really no lift or no value add to the client experience. So we have some technology going on internally. We've got some apps for realtor facing apps, client facing apps. We're changing. Everything's done here, right? Everything's on the phone now, which is very, very different. When I first started, man, I had manila folders that I had to echo fasten both sides, put the little metal things in, then hole punch all my file and put it all together and hand it off to my processor. Right now, it's like, you have a phone? Yes, I have a phone. Got it. Send me your pay stubs, send me your W-2, send me your bank statements. Boom. Everything can be done on the phone. We have a secure online portal. Talk to you. I want to talk to somebody. I don't want to text. I would rather talk to somebody. But if that's the case, that's where we're going. Boom, boom, boom. It's all done here. So, that's nothing that's crazy innovative. It's just simply like that's we're adapting to where the marketplace is, and that's something that the industry stayed stagnant for a while with innovation. And post COVID, things really started to fly again, just because of where cost to produce went, but also the client experience, right? Like people they don't really want to talk to you. As long as you give them a good square deal, then they're going to get a good square deal. If they have no idea about what home ownership, then you know what? Let's get on the phone. Let's get on Teams. Yeah, that's something easy. Like there was a lot of times I would meet with clients in person, right, to take their application, understand what their financial picture looks like, and then understand what their goals are with home ownership. And then that kind of went away. I went to the phone, and then COVID just kind of completely went away. Right, there's phone calls with a lot of emails. I've asked our sales force, like, hey, either get back in person or get on Teams. Right, you get to build a relationship with someone. And this is a huge, it's typically the biggest financial purchase of everyone's life, right?
Yep.
How do you not build a relationship with somebody? I want, if I'm buying a house, like I want my mortgage guy or gal, I want them in my corner. I want them to understand what my hopes and dreams are. And if I can convey that properly and I can forge that relationship and build that trust, I know for a fact if I'm choosing that right person or the realtor that I'm working with referred me to that right lender, I know that they're going to do the right job for me.
Yeah.
So I just think, personal connection is really important.
And that's a hard thing to get in today's day. Like you said, people would rather text more often than pick up the phone and call somebody. So
going back, I'll just add in one other thing. Internally speaking, we're looking at some different types of stuff in regards to efficiencies, a lot of automation. We have an AI underwriter going on.
That was going to be my next question was how is AI getting into your space?
Yeah, it's changing. It's certainly changing. And, what this call that I had today was I had to explain to the operations staff, that, not sales, the operations staff, that we are investing into AI. We are investing into automation. We are investing into offshore right now. But hey, heads up, this isn't to take your job and to replace your job. And it's my job to explain the why to the company. And what I said was, this is going to augment what you're doing on a daily basis. Therefore, it's going to speed everything up so you can touch more files. You get to make more money as well. So yeah, look, we've got some AI going on. Like all of our guidelines, we've been able to drop into a chatbot. So anybody on the road or wherever they might be, they literally can just text in a question and it's going to give you underwriting guidelines back, as opposed to going into our intranet, searching for it, finding for it, right? Like these are the small steps that, what it does is it buys back minutes. Therefore, your time spent is your highest and best value. And so it's going to continue to change, right? Because you got to understand where your highest and best value or time spent is. And when that happens, by augmenting part of that process, you've got to figure out if the smart companies and the smart teams and loan officers then need to determine, how do I backfill those minutes, and who can I delegate this task to, and how can I go out and do my highest and best? So yeah, look, it's not going away. It's here to stay. And it's one of those things, the companies that aren't dodging it, they're going to get left behind.
Yeah, I second that, man. So let's get into mortgage strategies for different buyer profiles. If I'm a first-time home buyer right now, which is probably a good chunk of our listeners or viewers, what kind of advice do you have for them in today's market where inventory is short, competition is way up, especially if it's in a prime location that a lot of people want to be in? What's your advice for that?
Yeah. In 2024, 44% of conventional issuances were first-time homebuyers. Issuances mean loans that were written and sold to the GSEs, sold to Fannie and Freddie. 66% of Ginnie, FHA and VA loans were first-time homebuyers, right? That's 50% of the marketplace was first-time buyers at an average age of 38. So what's my advice? My advice is what you need to do first is you need to understand what your buying power is. More importantly, before you even get to where your buying power is, you internally need to speak to yourself, your financial planner, your spouse. You need to determine where your comfort levels lie. Like that's number one, right? So it's how much cash do you have available? and how much do you want your payment to be? Where are you going to be comfortable? Now, in that, you've got to kind of go through that, because you might say, I want payment at X, but there's also some benefit to owning home, right? You have property taxes that are a deduction. You have mortgage interest that is a deduction. So, understanding where that comfort level is. And then from there, you do need to engage with a loan officer. Like, it's really important to understand what financing looks like, what options are out there, what grant programs are out there, how much of a down payment you need, or, Matt, I want my payment to be X. Got to understand that we need an extra $23,000 to get to your payment there. Okay, let me see. Right. So, being well prepared in this type of market is the most important step any first time buyer should be thinking about, right? Because we see it or hear it all the time. I'm kind of thinking about, maybe I want to buy a house, to, holy cow, I just saw this new listing, I want to buy it. Yeah. And all of a sudden it's like, well, you got to call my lender. How much can you get qualified? Can you afford it? I don't know. Right. So understanding, again, where your comfort levels lie, but also, where your affordability lies. And then stepping that out and going back to, working with a team, right? So it's a loan officer, but it's a real estate agent as well, right? Hey, Matt, call this buyer. Got it. I spoke to them. They're good at $300,000 sales price. We could push to 325 if you get 4% seller credit, because they don't have enough cash to go that high to fund the payment. So now all of a sudden there's flexibility in that. And then like a good partnership with someone that's going to spend time with that buyer, understand what their goals and their needs are, and then convey that back to you and have that open dialogue between the team right there. That's the team that's representing what their hope and dream is to buy this home. Like, it's up to us to formulate how we win and help this client. But yeah, the number one thing that a buyer needs to be doing right now is ensuring that they understand what qualifications look like, what payments look like, et cetera. Because look, you might make $300,000 or $400,000, and you might have $200,000 that your grandma gave to you. You can afford a $100,000 house, but do you have any idea what the payments look like? Anybody can write a contract up to get under contract, and all of a sudden see what the payment looks like and say, well,
See, we don't see that all the time. We do see, oftentimes people can afford a lot more than they're comfortable with on a payment scale. But I think that education piece that you mentioned, just say, here's what you can write off. So yes, here's what your payment looks like on it, which might feel uncomfy, but talking to your accountant, it's actually going to be more like this.
Right.
At the end of the day. So yeah, I love that. Now let's shift gears to our luxury and high net worth clients. Mm-hmm. So for those buyers in love space, which around here is pretty much anything over $1 million, even though it seems like, $1 million doesn't really quite get you what it used to. What kind of strategies should they consider? Are we talking jumbo loans, portfolio lending? What are some keys for some high end purchases?
It's really goes back to the same kind of thing, right? It's like, it's no matter how much money you have, it's also about how much leverage do you want and what are you comfortable with. Non-conforming paper, being jumbo mortgages, they can be a little bit more nuanced, meaning, that's a portfolio product. When it's an agency paper, so 806 or less loan amount and interim kind of call it, that's sold and securitized on the secondary market. A portfolio jumbo non-conforming loan, is going to an investor, a bank. They're going to hold that in their portfolio, and that's where it sits until they're thrown off or they re-securitize it and sell it out. So what would I say to a jumbo investor, a jumbo buyer right now is kind of the same thing. Again, it's like you still need to talk to the lender if you're getting leverage, right? If you need a loan, you need a loan. So understanding what that looks like. And then it's, somebody buying a $3 or $4 million house, right? I would assume they probably own something. What are they doing with that house? Are they going to sell it? Do they need to sell it before they buy this one? We have a bridge loan that we use all the time right now. What a bridge loan is when you own a home and you're looking to purchase a new home, you have a ton of equity in the home that you currently own, but you want to buy this new house, but all your equity's wrapped up in the old house. But the seller's like, I've got this hot property, buddy. I'm not taking what's called a contingent contract, meaning your contract that you're running is contingent upon you selling your old home. So we utilize a bridge on a lot of our jumbo loans because typically that client owns a home and they're buying into their next home, but they need the equity because you owned a house in the last, I don't know, if you bought a house between 21 and any time before that, it's worth a heck of a lot more money right now, right? So there's equity. Let's extract that equity let's push down the amount of leverage we need on the next house. So we've been using a lot of bridge loans. On the jumbo side of things, that client typically isn't as sensitive to what a rate looks like, right? They typically have their cash in hand. It's not coming from a gift. They typically have their cash in hand, and payment wise, it really just comes down to how much do I want to leverage? Typically on a much higher end or luxury property, it was when I was speaking to a buyer or a homeowner, future homeowner, it wasn't about, oh, my payment's X, and I would rather it be Y. It's, let's talk about what work needs to be done to this property.
Yeah.
Right. Like, I get it. Your payment's going to be $1,000 more a month, which for you doesn't necessarily move the needle. Fantastic. About a great job. But what does it look like after you buy it? Do you need to hold back some cash? Do you need to do any renovation work? Does your wife want to redo the kitchen kind of thing? And it was like, so it's a different type of conversation. It was I'll say it was a higher level conversation. It was more of like advisory as opposed to education.
Real estate investors and flippers. Haven't seen a lot of these lately. Not nearly as much as we've seen in the past, but how do you leverage financing for investment properties right now? Do you have any creative lending strategies to try and maximize those portfolios?
We do, yeah. There's what's called a non-QM mortgage, a non-qualified mortgage. And, it's completely different than what was being written in the early 2000s, meaning in the early 2000s, it's called stated state or a no-doc or a ninja loan, whatever you want to call it. And it really was like, look, if you've got a heartbeat in Social Security or borrow somebody's Social Security, fantastic, we'll give you a mortgage. These non-QMs are very different. And what happened with COVID was a lot of people started their own businesses, right? Like the employment changed, and the way that employers paid changed. You look at travel nurses, you look at like all types of pay started to change. A lot of entrepreneurial spirits came out during COVID and they started their own companies. Self-employed buyers can be a little bit more challenging to work with or qualify due to the fact that they have to have their business open for, let's say, minimum 12, depends upon the product, et cetera, but let's say 12 to 24 months, right? And there has to be a steady stream of increased income. So what's happened in the last couple of years is as investors started to come back because property values started to rise pretty quickly, investors in 2021, it was a pretty prevalent investor market. Look at institutional buyers, right? Like it's a very different game. So these non-QMs have come back, get a non-qualified mortgage. And what they are is they're very, very high qualified paper, meaning mortgages. Their performance on servicing side of things, meaning, there aren't defaults on them. There are defaults on them. There aren't many defaults on them. I can't say there aren't defaults because there's going to be defaults anyway.
Right.
But it's a different way of looking at how it works, right? So these loans don't meet agency guidelines. They don't meet Fannie and Freddie guidelines. But what they do is they meet, that makes sense, guideline.
Yeah.
Oh, I get it. This guy opened up a business 12 months ago and he's cash flowing $50,000 in profit. But the agency said you have to have that business open for 2 years. Well, this guy's going to qualify for first mortgage. Like I'm pretty sure he's not going to default on the $4,000 monthly payment. He's bringing in $50,000 profit a month.
Right.
So, that's one way, which is what's called a bank statement program. So you're qualifying off of assets coming in, and it's a 12-month bank statement program. So you're showing that there truly is the income coming in. It's just that, again, that the income doesn't meet the agency guidelines. And then secondly, it's what's called a DSCR, which is a debt service coverage ratio, which is this. I want to buy this investment property. I can buy this investment property. My payment's going to be $1,500 a month, but I know that per comparables, my cash flow is going to be $1,750 a month. My rent. So my cash flow is $250 positive on a monthly basis. Rubber stamp go. Makes sense?
Yeah.
Right. If you have the liquidity to put the down payment down, if you have the credit scores to qualify for the mortgage, but if you're buying an investment property and you can see that the rent is going to supersede what the obligation is going to look like, just keep on going. Right. That's a qualified mortgage. So, these have changed the game a little bit. Something that they used to be called Alt-A, or prime, subprime mortgages. Like these aren't subprime mortgages. They perform very, very well in the secondary market. There's very low prepaid speed to them because they're just mortgages to refinance or pay off. So yeah, look, we've seen a lot of investors pick up a lot of property right now. Now, with that said, I'm talking to some investors out there right now, and we're working on being for lenders of some property, because here's what's also happening. So there's been an inventory challenge since 2021, right?
Yep.
So so why? And it goes back to, if you look from 2010 to up to now, it goes back to housing starts, meaning new home builders building new houses and population growth. New home builders in 2010, it goes down. No new houses being built. And that was because there's too much inventory, way too much inventory. Nobody wanted to buy houses then. So then you take a next 12, 13 year run with that, and home builders weren't building enough houses to keep pace with the population growth, right? So yeah, we have an epidemic in the nation right now that we don't have enough homes. We don't have enough doors for those that want to purchase homes. Come 20 and 21, what ended up happening was rates went to zero. A huge flood to the market. I want to buy, I want to buy, I want to buy. Why wouldn't you? At 0%, 2.5%, right?
Right.
So we saw investors coming in. We also saw institutional investors coming in buy. Now, when you're buying slugs of homes, meaning you're buying, not just one or two, like you got a couple hundred or a couple thousand homes. Typically those are cross leveraged or collateralized, and it's a commercial loan. Most commercial loans are on a balloon payment, whether it be a 3-year, 5-year, 7-year term. What's happening right now is there was very, very low leverage in the early 2020 and 2021. That leverage is rolling over right now. So it's that 3-year, that 5-year arm or balloon. What's happening right now is at a 2 or 3% interest rate, that pops to 7 or 8 or 10 on the commercial side of things. The IRR, the return on this investment, is starting to get shrunk pretty quickly. And if you have one rental turnover, if you have one damaged property, you have X, Y, and Z, therefore your profit may go away. Boom. So what's happening right now is we're starting to see some investors come back into the market and looking to offload some property. So, look, here's how I look at this, good and bad, right? It's going to be good because we're going to have more interest. It's going to be more opportunity, which should yield more conveyances, right? Organically just have more conveyances, which is good for the marketplace. The bad is could we see price points? I don't want to say drop, but flatline right now. Maybe some marketplaces start getting down a little bit. But flatline, I think it's all right. If you look back at appreciation from 2012 up until about 2019, there wasn't that much appreciation.
No.
So 2021 were those, oh boy, this is false. This is real. The market's going to wildly correct and come back down. I'm not in that camp. I think that, what the appreciation we saw in those 2 years, that 24-month duration, which was really quick and really wide, a lot of that was some catch up. And it's also supply and demand. And until that evens out, I don't see home prices coming down too drastically anytime soon. There are some marketplaces that have already seen some, reduction in price. But if you look at the why, it's that there's too much inventory. There's not enough demand.
Right. And that makes sense, man. That makes sense. Let's do a couple minutes of rapid fire Q&A stuff before we get you out of here. What's one trend in real estate that excites you right now?
What's one trend in real estate that excites me right now? That's now, here's from a business standpoint, here's my answer is this is the most opportunistic marketplace I've seen since 2008. And what I mean by that is this: it's hard, man. It's hard to make money right now. But what I mean is there's so much attrition happening. There are so many other organizations and or individual salespeople that are saying it's been so hard. It's been 3 years. I don't want to keep going. And I'm looking at this and saying, I look back at 2008, I didn't know any difference. And what I'm trying to push our team to do is say, I don't know any difference. Let's wipe this slate clean. This is my first year doing this, my first day doing this. I'm going to go and attack this marketplace, and I'm not going to yes, it's challenging, but I'm not going to let challenging overcome or supersede the way I'm going to operate. I'm going to go back to work. I'm going to keep my work ethic up, and I'm going to outlook everybody, because these are the years that some young loan officers are going to build really, really, and real estate agents will build very beautiful careers.
Totally agree. What is your favorite business or real estate book right now? if anything like that? I know you're a reader. I just don't know how much time you've had to be reading books lately.
I actually just I started the other day. It's oh man, I'm gonna pull this up for you. Next question, I'll come back to you because this goes back to I'm gonna tell you. Hold on.
You an Audible guy?
No,
I do listen.
no, I just grabbed this unreasonable hospitality.
Oh, yeah. Okay. All right. We had another guest mention that book a couple weeks ago.
Dude, look, it just comes down to this service, right? It's not a sales guy, I'm a service guy. And that's it. It's unreasonable hospitality. Why didn't you treat people so well? Well, because I want them to come back. I want them to remember the experience.
Well said, man. Bold prediction for the housing market in 25.
Bold prediction is this, because everyone wants rates to come down. We want to see a better marketplace. I don't think rates are coming down. I think we're going to see a lot of what we saw very similar to last year. Although again, the players that are playing right now are going to do very well. And I think we're going to see some individual performers have very, very, very strong years this year.
Matt Nader, you're the fucking man. Thanks for coming in and doing this. Where can listeners and viewers find you and learn more about First Home Mortgage?
FirstHomeMortgage.com is our website. Thank you for having me out today. I appreciate it. Anybody can always reach out to me and ask me any questions. Happy to discuss, happy to connect you with any of our loan officers to make sure that, you're getting the best mortgage, getting the best advice and ensuring that, you got something behind you that truly cares about your financial well-being.
Fantastic, man. Thank you so much for coming in.